Welcome, ladies. We're just going to give a few minutes so that give a few minutes for people to log in before we get started. Welcome.
Hello.
Lisa, it's 11:04. Why don't we go ahead and get started?
Welcome, everyone. This is ACG's Women Empowering Women, and this is our third event. We're so excited to have our third event, and it's been developed through a partnership with ACG Arizona, ACG Dallas Fort Worth, and the LA chapters. So you'll get to meet all of our co-hosts today. And we're excited because today we're featuring Arizona's own, I'm calling her Arizona's own, Heidi Jannenga with WebPT. If you're from Arizona, I'm sure you know who this wonderful woman is. I am Elise Thorpe, and I am the president of ACG Arizona. I am also a principal with Levitt and Touche, which is a Marsh and McLennan agency. And if you're not familiar with that, we are a risk management consulting and brokerage firm, and my expertise really focuses more on the benefits side, working with CEOs, CFOs, and HR professionals and developing a strategic benefit package to attract and retain talent, and also one that aligns with their financial objectives. So we have a few housekeeping items before we get on with the show. We're going to give brief intros. Heidi's going to speak and tell her story for about 30 minutes till about 11:45 or 1:45 Central Time. And then we are going to have 3 breakout sessions of 13 minutes each so that we have an opportunity to network with each other and meet other women that are on the call today. And the last thing is you can have your chat questions, submit them through the chat, and we will have Q&A with Heidi as well. So I think that's it. And I'm going to pass it over to Jen Dallas.
Thanks so much, Elise. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And I'm excited to be connecting with all of you today. I'm Jen Coelho, and I co-chair the ACG DFW Women's Committee with Abby Fuqua. And I'm also an audit senior manager in the financial services group at EisnerAmper LLP, where I also serve as a steering committee member for our ERG, the Women of EisnerAmper. For those of you who aren't familiar, EisnerAmper is a leading full-service accounting advisory and tax firm and among the nation's largest accounting firms. We provide professional services to a broad range of clients across many industries, including the financial services industry. And here in Texas, we have approximately 100 employees servicing clients in a wide range of industries. ACG DFW and particularly the Women's Committee have been a huge part of my networking and development since my move from New Jersey to Texas in 2019. And I'm just really grateful that we have this opportunity to co-host women getting together across the country. And so I'm going to pass it over to Cornelia.
Welcome, ladies. I'm Cornelia Chang. I represent ACG Los Angeles. I'm a managing director with Brightwood Capital for my day job. I lead investment origination and execution for the Western region for Brightwood. We are a New York headquartered direct lending fund. I'm based in LA, and we're currently investing out of our 4th fund, and we provide growth capital in the form of debt and minority capital to growing businesses with at least 5 million of EBITDA. Tech, media, telecom, and healthcare are 2 of our very strong verticals. I also serve on the board of LTC Properties. It is a publicly traded senior housing real estate REIT, and the board is 50% women. I also serve on the board of ACG Los Angeles and chair the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And so for me, I've been an ACG member for over 10 years. The relationship and the connections I've made have really helped me professionally. And ACG has also given me opportunities to be a volunteer leader with the organization where I can make an impact. But more importantly is meeting wonderful women and connections at events like this. That is really what's really empowering about ACG. A lot of the people I've met have become friends over the years. So I encourage all of you to connect with each other afterwards. For ACG members, you will receive the full contact information for all of the attendees today. And for non-members, you'll have to connect through LinkedIn. And I encourage you to consider joining ACG. There's a chapter pretty much all over the country. We will be migrating to back to in-person meeting by the summer for most of the chapters. So the events will even get better than virtually. So now I am excited to introduce our speaker, Dr. Heidi Jannenga. She's an amazing physical therapist who saw a need to make some change in how they do things to really be able to serve her patients better. When she didn't see what was available in the market and she didn't find what she needed, she went and built it herself. So along the way, Heidi became a startup founder, a tech entrepreneur, and really changed how the industry does things. And she's also an amazing mom, if that's not inspiring enough. So Heidi, take it from here.
Thank you, Cornelia. Thank you so much. And it's an honor to be. I just got muted. I'll unmute. Okay. So thank you again for having me and allowing me this opportunity to share my story. And what I'm really looking forward to actually after this 30 minutes is the Q&A portion, because I love the interaction component. And then I'm really looking forward to the breakout sessions as well. So just a little bit of background. I am a physical therapist. I was practicing for a little over 15 years in sports medicine and outpatient private practice before sort of moving to this whole different side of technology. Today, I hold the role of Chief Clinical Officer at WebPT. WebPT is the market-leading software platform for outpatient private practice physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech-language pathologists, which we call rehab therapists. So we started the company back in 2008, literally out of the back of a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix with 2 employees and a brilliant, well, we didn't know it was a brilliant idea then, but we thought we had a brilliant idea. And you fast forward to where we are today, and we have over 90,000 users and just over 20,000 practices across North America, which represents about 40% of the outpatient market share. So it's been an amazing, amazing ride. It's still sometimes hard to believe when, I think about like where we've started and where we've come. But to really understand the whole of my entrepreneurial journey, I guess, we have to go back to some of my roots. I am the product of 2 immigrant parents. My mom is Japanese. My dad immigrated to this country from Austria, where they found each other in Hawaii, of all places. And so I know that some of, a lot of what has brought me to this place as a leader and sort of my entrepreneurial background definitely came from them. So next slide. So back, I guess if we're looking at, we can go on to the next slide, please. If you take yourself back to 2006, I had been practicing as a physical therapist for a little over a decade prior to that, and had worked my way up to become a clinic director of a very large multi-location sports medicine practice here in Tempe, Arizona. And at that point in time, I was very happy with what I was doing. And I had sort of, reached a lot of the goals that I had set for myself professionally in terms of working with professional athletes, college athletes, high school athletes, the weekend warriors. Like I had created an amazing business within, the space that I felt very comfortable in and had become an expert in. And I, helped my patients get through, pain, recovery, did a lot of post-surgical work. But of course, I also, as a clinic director, had P&L responsibilities. And so over the years, insurance reimbursements, which equates to our top line revenue, were steadily declining. And I started to really have to scrutinize my expenses. And 2 of the expenses that were our largest were transcription and dictation. And you do have to transport yourself back in time, because it is hard to believe that 15 years ago, 80% of therapists were actually documenting on pen and paper. And the majority of physicians were also still documenting, whether it was via transcription or dictation as well. And so some of the physicians had just started transitioning into digital documentation or use of an electronic medical record. And I figured there had to be something out there that was there for physical therapists. And as Cornelia mentioned, our search came up unfruitful. And so, I sort of had a decision. Do I stick with the status quo and just keep going? Do I make compromises in our overall profitability margins? Or do I just figure out a new way to solve this problem? And so at the time, you can go to the next slide. I personally wasn't willing to just stick with the status quo. I knew there had to be a better way for my practice and definitely much more efficient for my therapist. And lucky for me, my boyfriend at the time happened to be a technologist who was a seasoned entrepreneur as well, who had expertise in building enterprise scale web-based software platforms. And so together, we put our heads together, and over the next 9 months, as I continued to work full-time as the PT and clinic director, we built what would become version 1 of WebPT, which was tackling the specific problem that I was having, which was eliminating the cost for our documentation. And so we set out to do with what no other technology platform in our space had done, was really look at the workflow of the therapist and the clinical tests and everything that was specific to PT, and build that into a technology platform. So we started to see efficiency gains very quickly in my practice, and had started to talk to some of my colleagues in the area. So within the next 6 months, we had 10 actually additional clinics paying us for the software, using our software, and giving us very positive feedback. And so we continued to iterate over the next, about 9 months or so. And that's when we did that market research and found that 80% of therapists were using pen and paper. And so that was sort of our light bulb moment at the end of 2007 to say, wow, what the problem that I was having in my practice was somewhat ubiquitous throughout the entire industry. And so in February of 2008, we launched the company. We had one employee. Our very first employee was a sales associate who, obviously in startup mode, you wear a lot of hats. We all learned a little HTML to help build out our first website and things like that. And I share this with the WebPT story with you because I think it's really representative of, something future, hopefully, women entrepreneurs and leaders have to understand, that at the end of the day, it starts with being a problem solver and being willing to, challenge the status quo. Entrepreneurship is hard work, especially when you're trying to balance all the other things that are going on in your world. But for me, the dividends have made it completely worthwhile. And, I still have to pinch myself sometimes because, who gets to disrupt your own industry and change the sort of landscape of how people actually operate? Again, it's been an incredible ride. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, 15 years ago, running a technology company really wasn't even on my radar. I think actually, if you would have asked me at that point in time, would you ever think about that possibility? I probably would have laughed because technology and Heidi Jannenga weren't always used in the same sentence very often as a clinician. But I was very, very focused on patient care and operational efficiency, and that skill set and what my expertise as a subject matter expert really then translated in what we were able to do with the software and how much it resonated with our potential customers. And so as we continue to grow, I think it's really been apparent for me, that transition point from, being a therapist. There was a decision in 2010 that I had to make after we took our first round of funding in, which was just a small angel round, local here from Arizona, that WebPT was now a real thing. And I had to make a career choice of, remaining a practicing therapist or, switching over to become part of 100% of my time being part of WebPT. And to take that leap of faith from patient care, where I had, really found my identity, professional identity, and associated a lot of my, instant gratification in what I was as a professional in there, to jump over to something that was very foreign to me. But the epiphany moment that really helped me to make that leap of faith was going back to the roots of why I became a physical therapist. And at the end of the day, I love helping people. I love being able to see them, come in on crutches and be able to go back to playing soccer, and having my hands in encouraging and inspiring them to do the right things to get them there. And so the epiphany was that I had a finite number of people that I was going to be able to do that within my practice. And with WebPT, I saw the opportunity to not only help exponentially more patients, but my peers and the industry as a whole. And so that bigger mindset thinking of expanding my opportunities was really the epiphany, if you will, and helped me make that leap of faith into this completely different profession. And what also was really interesting to me is that, you know, I had this imposter syndrome going on. Well, that I'm going into a different I'm going into technology, which is completely foreign to me. How am I ever going to succeed in this area when I have so much to learn, you know, when I was already in my 40s? And part of that was that, again, once I got in there, understanding that this skill set that I had built up as an operational, efficient, you know, leader in the relationship building that I had made with patients, the relationship I had been made with referral sources, all of those skill sets immediately translated over in what we were trying to accomplish with WebPT. And so sometimes I think we don't necessarily give ourselves enough credit when pivots or changes happen to revert back to all of the things that we've learned and be able to really understand how they translate, even if it's not necessarily one-to-one specific connection. Next slide, please. So obviously there was a lot of long days and long nights spent building out this technology platform, and it was really, really hard. But I really want to just hammer home the point that it is all and ends up being worth it. And the hours and opportunities that get put in just lead to, as long as you have a very specific purpose, and those small wins along the way getting celebrated make a big difference. Next slide, please. So because my experience with WebPT, I really remain a proponent of bootstrapping. We bootstrapped for the first 4 years of the company, 2 years of build to the first 2 years in the company. In 2010, we took a small round of funding, as I mentioned, an angel round, took $1 million into the company, turned that 1 million into 20 million within 3 years. In 2014, we took a venture capital round. We made a decision to sort of swing for the fences. The Affordable Care Act had been passed. Our demand was just overpowering us in terms of the opportunity. And so we took a funding round in 2014 from Battery Ventures, which I know many of you are probably familiar with, the top tier VC firm out of Silicon Valley. We turned their investment into exponential growth with the ability to then make acquisitions and continue to grow our platform and the offerings that we had, to now where we are at over $100 million company. And had the ability then in 2019, at the end of 2019, to parlay that into a private equity deal in which we sold to Warburg Pincus, who is now our funding partner, and just been an amazing group of folks to be supportive through this crazy year. You can move ahead 2 more slides, please. I think you're 1 slide behind me. So as I say that in terms of our history of what we've been able to do, one thing that has rang through all of our choices in funding partners has been no different than how we hire. And that is a very sort of values and culture first approach. We of course did our due diligence in talking to a lot of different companies, you know, that were referred to us, who were either Battery or Warburg invested portfolio companies. But we also did a lot of back channeling with leaders and employees of those companies, and also companies that didn't do so well, which I think is a really important thing to think about. It's all great when in roses and positive when things are going well, but how do people react when things aren't going so well was an important part of our due diligence process. Next slide, please. So broadly speaking, if we think about, you know, us as me as a leader, how we sort of grow our leaders within our organization, we understand that there is very different leadership strengths. And I think that it's really key to understand what your own sort of strengths are. We use some different testing mechanisms like strength finders, and we use the DISC for different communication styles, things like that. And we find those really helpful for our teams to at least start that introspective process. What we also learned and have been given a lot of credit for, which was kind of done not necessarily fully consciously, but in the early stages, we had between us founders, we had a important personality type of a visionary, and then what's known as an executor. So a visionary, the dreamer, has all kinds of brilliant ideas, but may not always be able to take those ideas and put them into action. And so the executor is able to garner those dreams and those visions to be able to put them into real life products. And so I was the executor to my then boyfriend and co-founder, as the sort of really dreamer who really could see the forest beyond the trees. Next slide, please. And then that's how we ran the company, very much a yin yang, understanding each other's strengths and bringing that together. As we continued to grow, we recognized that we were missing this important piece of the puzzle, which is called a processor. And that person has the ability to really take those processes that are in an organization and make them more scalable, whether it's bringing in tools or creating repeatable processes that now allow you to scale. And so our decision in 2010 was to bring in a CEO with those qualities. And so we created what everybody called us as the trifecta. Which was really, again, we've been given a lot of credit for being humble enough to know what your strengths are, what are the things that you need to round out in your team to be able to fully scale and continue to grow. And so I just challenge you to understand, what is your leadership strength? What are the strengths within yourself, and what are your passions that you're really, really good at? I say pile on to those because those make you happy. Those things that you don't like, you can hopefully, surround yourself with people, whether that's advisors or, hiring folks that can offset some of those things. Next slide, please. So along the way, I think you're one slide ahead now. Along the way, I also got, as we were continuing to grow, people would always ask me like, how have you been able to do this? How have you grown a company this fast, exponential growth? And I always sort of struggled to sort of talk about it in a very quick manner until I heard Kip Tyndall, who was the founder of the Container Store, speak about how he had built his company. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list now for 9 years in a row. And one of the great things about it is you get to go to these awesome conferences. And when I heard him speak, he started talking about a concept called conscious capitalism. And capitalism obviously has gotten some negative press of late, but we do know that it does provide an opportunity if you are using it from a conscious perspective to use profit for a power of good. And conscious capitalism is built around these 4 tenets, which is all about a higher purpose and common values, making everyone in your organization a stakeholder, whether that's executives, board, employees, even your vendors, part of your community, conscious leadership, and then also building and maintaining an amazing culture. And so next slide, please. Those are really, at the end of the day, how we've done it and how important those things are. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand how important culture can be in objective terms. That's been a struggle along the way, but there's a really amazing book called The Firms of Endearment, which was one of the first books written that really drove home the importance of overall company culture. And we've just subscribed to this from the very beginning. But in this book, the authors compare, companies like Patagonia, Whole Foods, the Container Store with the Good to Great companies and famous Jim Collins book. And what they found is over a 10-year horizon, 13 of the Firms of Endearment companies outperformed the Good to Great companies by over 1,000 percentage points. A 3-to-1 ratio in terms of the take-home value of these companies. So just puts an exclamation point for me. And again, validating why we invest in and talk about openly how important our company culture is. And just to give you a little bit of flavor of that, next slide, please. I wanted to share our core values. Our values are very unique to us. Yes, we drop the F-bomb in our core values. Not to offend anybody, it's one of everybody's favorite. And really it is all about accountability and our belief that we want people to know that they can make mistakes and it's okay. Like innovation, we know stems from mistakes happening and the learnings that you get from there. And so we thought it was important enough to put a big exclamation point on it. And what I'm really most proud of, honestly, is that our core values actually were born out of our employees. Our first 40 employees sat around in a room. We asked them a few questions. What do we stand for as an organization? What types of people do we want in this organization? What are the values that drive our vision? And those got distilled down into what our core values are today. Those 40 employees to now scale it to where we are today at over 650 employees. Next slide, please. Part of it has also been diversity, equity, inclusion. I know this is a high priority, and Cornelia, congrats on your new role as board chair. And I know even in our board, this has been something that's been a priority for us a long time, but now even being highlighted even more as a women-led organization with myself and our CEO, Nancy Ham, who has been our CEO since 2016. Next slide, please. So one of the things also that, there's not a lot of founders in organizations that have stayed through the different iterations of our company and the evolution. Founders usually sort of fade out of the works, maybe at the VC round for sure, sometimes at the PE round. But for me, it's just been, it's been the connection with not only the industry, but also with our people. We started small and had this family atmosphere that still, even at 650 employees, still exists today. And part of that is just the humanization of our leaders and the criticality that we put on that, of their having times of vulnerability and sharing. Part of that is through writing. We have a week or a monthly newsletter that goes out that we ask our senior leaders to contribute to and write about something that they've learned or wanted to share. And that's been a really key portion of our ability to really remain connected, even through COVID times, and really remain authentic to our teams. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to tell a quick story, just in terms of, the breaking the glass ceiling. Obviously, it's an honor to be here. There's some powerful, amazing women in this audience. But just from just a quick anecdote of how important this actually is and how it can actually translate into, not such great, business acumen, I guess. When we were going out for VC funding, we had lots of meetings, and the majority of time I was the only woman in the room. And I just remember being in the high rise in New York, having all these meetings for a few hours, and we were all taking a break, and I needed to go to the bathroom. And so I asked, where's the women's restroom? They pointed me that way. There was a keypad on the outside that needed a code. So I walked back, and I asked, hey, what's the code to the women's restroom? And all the guys looked at each other. And of course, nobody else it was late in the day and nobody else was there. And of course, my first reaction is, I don't care. I'll just go to the men's room. Like, what's the combination of the men's code? And they were frantically making calls and finally had called someone to get the women's restroom number. But it was really embarrassing for them. And, frankly, I was just a little bit taken aback that I wouldn't think that far ahead. But just a funny story to say that, it is really important. And needless to say, we did not take funding from those funding partners. Last slide, please. Thank you. And in closing, I just wanted to sort of sum this up, that I know I've given you a lot of information, and hopefully some of the stories you can resonate with. And we've gone through a lot, but really sort of the key points that I wanted to drive home was being a problem solver, sort of understanding that bootstrapping can work. I know there's a lot of emphasis on funding these days, but part of that is truly building a company that people can and want to invest in, prioritizing investor alignment with your culture, balancing sort of the leadership styles and how important that is, introducing you all to conscious capitalism, and then most importantly, understanding your company culture and building up your peers within it. So with that, I will take some questions.
Ladies, don't be shy. Type your questions in the chat. I think Brittany has collected some of them already. While she's kind of doing that, and don't be shy as you put your questions in. I have a question for you, Heidi. When you think about culture, growing from 2 people to 650 people, that's one of the biggest challenges, to maintain same level of culture and connection with that.
Right.
What's a tip you have for us, or from your experience, or something that you learned along the way, as we think about growing companies, what to avoid?
What to avoid? Well, I'll tell you what has been part of the key. I mean, we've had 2 CEOs outside of, myself in the beginning, and hiring CEOs and also our funding partners who value and prioritize culture. Like, we talked about that for days when we were going through our diligence process, like to really understand how important that is. And of course, it's evolved with every transaction. It's evolving now as we move to digital first. But for us, those values, we've infused those values into everything we do. I think some of the mistakes that people make is they create core values, they're words on the wall, but they don't mean anything to anyone. And so if you look at our job descriptions, you will see those words woven in. Our recruiting process and our interview process includes very specific questions that have to do with some of those values. And I say values because I think hiring for culture is getting a little bit of a bad rap right now, because it's hiring for like people. And that's really at the end not what we're trying to do. It's really about those values of individuals that are joining. And then even our performance reviews, you see that language everywhere. And so it's completely woven into our environment from the top down. And again, can't emphasize enough that you have to have leaders that embrace it, or else it will die.
Great, thanks, Heidi. On that same, I do have a few questions that I've collected throughout, but just on that same topic, Kristen Myers just added, would you have any suggestions on how we find a co-founder if we have a great business idea, but lack the visionary skills you described?
Yes. So co-founders are it's like a marriage. So you got to pick your partner very carefully. And first and foremost, for me, it was about the introspection of knowing yourself and what your strengths are before you go in search of what you need, right? So having an understanding of what you're willing to sort of give up and share. But also, at the end of the day, if it's your idea, you have to have a little bit of vision to understand what you're trying to create in order to invite someone in to share that vision and help it to evolve. Because if you don't sort of have that a little bit of solid footing on that in that area, it's too easy then to get persuaded maybe into doing something that you're not as passionate about. So I think understanding the problem you're trying to solve initially is critically important. And again, knowing the things that you need to round out your strengths. Again, it's you first before you go in search of others.
Love it. Okay, so I do have some questions, a little more maybe on the technology side. Mm-hmm. So Kelly Mooney and both Alex Firth kind of sent in similar questions. Building that website did you do it from scratch? Did you have one that builds websites for you? And then how did you coach yourself into that starting point, being so unfamiliar with technology, and turn it into a business model? So
our platform, separate from our website, we did have some experience in website buildings internally. So we did do everything ourselves. Not me personally, but our team and people that we, hired into the company. My co-founder was the technology expert. So he had a lot of experience in building out web-based applications. And so I became basically the product manager of building out all the requirements and things that I wanted to see and how it would function in the, sort of workflow. And then he would code and build and, be able to create. And then I would QA and make sure it was functional. We got the feedback from clinicians in my practice. So we were getting that iterative feedback, and it would just continue on that cycle. As far as once I sort of really dove in, it was really knowing the nomenclature. So I actually took the time to become a certified product owner. I went through Agile training. I love to learn, and I would sit in meetings and I would write down all the words that I didn't know that were happening during the meeting. And then I would smile and nod sometimes, or I raise my hand and say, hey, can you explain this more during a meeting? But there were a lot of times where I would just wait and I would ask somebody afterwards to say, hey, can you explain this a little further? This is what I think it means, or this is what I think we're doing, but can you please explain it further? And so not being shy to say, I don't know, right? And ask for help, I think, which, a lot of times that's, you think you should know everything, but that's not always the case. And that shouldn't be the case, obviously, especially when you're diving into an area that's unfamiliar to you.
Great, thank you. We had a question from Dina Sampson. She says, I always hear stories of PE firms pushing companies prematurely toward their exit. Have you experienced this? And what are your recommendations for managing these private equity relationships?
Yeah. Again, pre-signing a deal, we wanted to have very clear picture of their goals. Through the diligence process, we talked to a lot of other portfolio companies to ask that very question, because we knew the lifetime can be somewhere between 5 to 7 years on average, sometimes 3 to 5 now. I think it's probably slipped a little bit. But we looked at their portfolio, and there were companies that they had held for, 8, 9, 10 years, and even beyond. And so it was more around, the relationship building, and that at some point you've got to trust that they are truly saying what they're going to do, right? The integrity of what they're saying is there, that it's a collaborative decision when we're all ready. For us, it was really the decision to go to private equity was that we had essentially outgrown our VC potential. We had moved into the enterprise space. There were some very large acquisitions that we needed to do that we weren't capable of doing. And so again, together, we knew there was more runway. We knew there was opportunity. And the timing was right for both parties to say, yep, this is where we should be. And we had set goals. We knew when we had reached 100 million that this was going to be a time we were going to have that conversation. And we did. And so it was, again, it's a partnership, right? And having those goals and candid conversations early and often to make sure everyone's on the same page. We never felt like we got pushed. And again, every year we met and exceeded our budget. So it was all roses, like this positive things, right? So again, I challenge you. I know there's some times when things might not go as well. I'll say this year with, Warburg Pincus being a brand new owner of our company and COVID hitting, I mean, holy crap, we were like, oh man, how is this going to go? But I will just say, like, they have stayed true to everything that they said they were, empowered us, allowed us to do the decisions that we wanted to do, shoving more money at us if we need it to build more. Like it's been amazing. So again, I think we're still kind of in the honeymoon phase, but who knows?
That's fantastic. So we did get a bunch of questions about culture as well, but I know that everyone is getting antsy to go into the breakout rooms as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to Cornelia, and thank you, Heidi, for answering all of these wonderful questions.
Sure.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Heidi. Ladies, we're going to the networking. Heidi's actually going to stay with us for the networking session for all 3 sessions. So keep your fingers crossed. You might end up in one of the small breakout rooms with Heidi. And Heidi, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's an truly amazing, inspiring story. And, and your personal passion really changed an entire industry. That is really amazing. We need more women founders, and particularly in every industry, particularly in tech, which is really a fast growing industry. And so that's amazing. So Brittany is going to hang in there, ladies. We're going to be, doing the small group allocation, and that should be happening as we speak. So, and